Welcome back to my channel, guys. In this video, we will be analysing the number one theme in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, duality. If you need a quick recap of the plot of the story or are interested in a character analysis of Jekyll and Hyde, check out my other videos linked in the description below. So, duality is the idea that there are two parts in one thing, for example, two sides of a coin. But in this novella, we are mostly looking at the duality in human nature. This theme shows up everywhere in the story, from the characters themselves to the very buildings they live in, which shows that the author, Robert Louis Stevenson, was not just writing about one man's drastic transformation, but also about an insightful exploration of the duality within all of us. This story has really stood the test of time, as without even reading the book, you may have already been familiar with the term Jekyll and Hyde, to describe someone that has a vastly different alter ego, or someone that is hiding a dark side. Of course, the most obvious depiction of duality is within the main character himself, Dr. Henry Jekyll, who says one of the most famous lines, "Man is not truly one, but truly two." But to get some context on why the idea of duality was so relevant at the time this book was written, we need to take a quick look at what Victorian society was like. The wealthy upper classes were obsessed with respectability, and everything from your social circle to the parties you threw, the clothes you wore, and even your everyday actions were under a microscope. People were expected to be pretty much perfect, and there was no room for misbehaving, indulging in vices, or letting loose in any way, or you would run the risk of scandal. Unfortunately, this meant that if you liked doing anything that was seen as indecent or not respectable, you would be forced to repress that side of yourself and maybe do it in secret and hope nobody ever found out. This is exactly what Jekyll's life was like, as he was born into a wealthy upper-class family and grew up to be a well-respected doctor in the community. However, he says that due to his status and social pressures, I concealed my pleasures, and that when I reached years of reflection, I stood already committed to a profound duplicity of life. For years, he repressed his dark side and hid the actions that were considered shameful by society until he found himself living a double life. As a man of science, he decides to conduct some ethically questionable experiments, which causes him to have a falling out with his doctor friend Lanyon, to see if he can physically separate the two parts of himself, the result of which is the wholly evil Mr. Hyde. Jekyll's dual nature has now been physically manifested, and is a symbolic release of his inner demons. When he talks about his first transformation into Hyde, he uses words and phrases to evoke an incredible sense of liberation and freedom, saying that he felt younger, lighter, happier in body. Within, I was conscious of a heady recklessness. At the same time, however, he acknowledges, I knew myself at the first breath of this new life to be more wicked, tenfold more wicked. He is immediately aware of the monster that he has created, but he feels so free as his alter ego that he simply does not care. Because Jekyll has felt restricted by society his whole life, his new persona allows him to strip off these lendings and spring headlong into the sea of liberty, whenever he chooses. And even better, he never has to take accountability for the actions of Hyde since they look so different physically. At first, this seems to be the perfect solution for Jekyll's inner duality, but we soon find out that he vastly underestimates the power of his evil twin. He starts out believing that he has total control, boasting, "The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde." But this is misleading, as with each transformation he grows weaker and weaker. I was slowly losing hold of my original and better self, and slowly becoming incorporated with my second and worse. Just because Jekyll put all his bad parts into Hyde does not mean that he was left with only the good parts. He is still as dual as ever, a mix of bad and good like we all are. In combination with Hyde then, his bad side, which was previously outweighed by the good side, is now the majority, and he inevitably begins to lose the Jekyll part of himself altogether. This shift is reflected in the language he uses to describe his transformations. While he used to feel absolute freedom as Hyde, he now finds himself trapped inside his alter ego, as Utterson sees him looking like some disconsolate prisoner in chapter 7. We could read this as a warning by the author to the readers, that by giving in to our bad side, we put ourselves at risk of losing what makes us good. From a religious context, the two sides of Jekyll and Hyde can be seen as sinful and virtuous. In Victorian England, the majority of people would have been Christians and believed in the concept of original sin. In the Bible, the first two humans, Adam and Eve, sinned by eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and as a result, we as their descendants were all tainted by their original sin. According to this then, we are all born with an innate desire to sin, and have to make up for it in our lives by doing good and charitable deeds. Jekyll tries to make up for the sins of Hyde by performing good deeds, saying he would even make haste where it was possible to undo the evil done by Hyde. And after the murder of Sir Danvers, people noted that, whilst he had always been known for charities, he was now no less distinguished for religion. In this case, however, even religion cannot save Jekyll, as he has gone too far to the wrong side, and eventually his original sin takes over. To Victorian readers, this story would have been particularly horrifying, as Jekyll is not some mad scientist or evil villain in a far-off country, but is instead a normal, well-respected gentleman right at home in London. If it could happen to him, Stevenson is saying, it could happen to anybody. And Jekyll is by no means the only one with a hidden dark side. Many of the other characters are revealed to have secret vices as well. His friend and lawyer Utterson, for example, is described as drinking gin when he was alone to mortify a taste for vintages. This isn't just talking about his drink preferences, but the fact that he does it when no one is watching, as having a strong drink like gin would have been seen as not very respectable. Hyde's housekeeper is described as having an evil face smoothed by hypocrisy, but her manners were excellent. Mr. Enfield, too, might have secrets to hide, as it is rather questionable as to what he was doing going home about 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, in time to see Hyde trample over the little girl. In fact, everyone apart from Hyde seems to be putting on a show of respectability, and through these characters Stevenson is holding up a mirror to expose the hypocrisy of society and the reader's own dark sides which are hidden from the world. The theme of duality extends beyond the people in this story and into their surroundings as well, particularly through the author's description of Jekyll's house and of London in general. Thanks to the class system, Victorian London was a place where extreme wealth and extreme poverty coexisted, and this was reflected in the area where Utterson and Enfield go for their walks. Stevenson writes that the street had a thriving trade and an air of invitation, but the street shone out in contrast to its dingy neighbourhood, as just down the road is a sinister block of building, which had the marks of prolonged and sordid negligence. This suggests that society's show of respectability hides a much darker underbelly that people don't want to admit exists. Even Jekyll's own house is a symbol of duality, as it has a respectable side to throw parties, host company, and live a regular upright life, while in the back he has a secret laboratory to conduct his morally controversial experiments, and to hide his alter ego away from the world. Stevenson explores duality through the structure of the novella and how he tells this particular story. At first he leads us to believe that Jekyll and Hyde are two different characters through his narrative, which at first follows Utterson's investigation of the mystery. It is only at the very end of the novel that we receive the missing pieces of the puzzle, and come to realize that Hyde and Jekyll are the same person, through the letters left by Dr. Lanyon and Dr. Jekyll. This gives a different perspective of the story through their eyes, and shows that there are multiple ways of viewing the same events. Additionally, this story contains both first-person and third-person narratives, which is another example of duality in the actual writing of the novella. So to sum up what we've discussed in this video, the theme of duality is ever present in the story, in the characters, in the setting, and even in the writing. Stevenson is clearly trying to tell us readers that we are dual by nature, with good and bad sides to us whether we like to admit it or not. This also serves as a criticism of Victorian society, who were incredibly hypocritical, only showing a perfect, polished face to the world and keeping their bad or shameful parts a secret. We could see this as a cautionary tale about the consequences of repressing our dark side, or forcing ourselves to always be perfect in the eyes of others, as it could lead to a much more disastrous outcome than if we were just to accept that having flaws and weaknesses is just a part of human nature. Jekyll is just an ordinary man whose bad side spiraled out of control, mostly because he felt that he did not have to accept responsibility for the actions of his alter ego Hyde, even though they were still the same person. If it could happen to him, it leaves us to wonder, what would we be capable of if we were able to separate the dark side of ourselves and live a life without consequences? Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for follow-up analysis videos soon to come. See you next time!